So think of it almost like now we're trying to cultivate the soil in Michigan. Yes, for
Hmm.
Berrien Springs, because we consider ourselves a leader in that regard, but for any school in Michigan that just wants to be able to operate non-traditional programs, particularly for our most marginalized students. And so this new role allows me to really shift gears away from those day-to-day a little bit and toward those big projects that can be better for all of our kids. And when I say
Right.
our kids, I say, yes, our Berrien Springs, our Link Learning, West Michigan Virtual Academy, Success Virtual Learning Centers of Michigan, all of our kids, but beyond that as well for all
Right.
districts that are really trying to do that work for kids in their communities.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Brighter Together podcast. My name is Janet Courtney, and my special guest today is Mitch Cumings. And Mitch is the Chief Strategy Officer at Berrien Springs Public Schools in Berrien Springs, Michigan. Mitch, thanks for coming, and I'm so happy to have you here.
Thanks so much for the invite. I'm glad to be able to talk a little bit about what we do. I think we are surrounded by some really remarkable people toward a really remarkable mission, and we love talking about it. We love sharing our story, and also sharing our vision for what comes next for us.
Awesome. So tell me about it. The floor is yours. I'm excited to hear about it.
Well, great. Well, Berrien Springs is a beautiful little community in Southwest Michigan, kind of down in the pocket of the lower pocket of the Mitten, in Michigan's Fruit Belt, and just a wonderful little community, great diversity. We share our city with Andrews University, an international university, which makes it a really unique town and community. But the other side of that is Berrien Springs is the operator of alternative education programs and non-traditional programs in Berrien County, but also across the state of Michigan. So we also support 3 off-site alternative education online/hybrid learning programs, and just in those 3 divisions, we have over 5,000 students. And so if you're familiar with the state of Michigan, we have 3 centers in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. So we're from Marquette to Monroe, which is in the southeast part of Michigan. It overlooks
Yeah.
Toledo. And then we're
Yep.
from Port Huron on the thumb, all the way to Muskegon on the west side. And so
Wow.
our 5,000 students are truly a statewide population.
Well, my uncle is lived in Monroe. He was actually in the education system. He's passed away now, but Terry Simonis was his name. If anybody in Michigan remembers him, but yeah, wow, that's really really cool. How did that come about?
Well, you've got to go back about 16 years. Now, Berrien Springs has always had an eye on non-traditional learning. They operated a very successful alternative education program on campus at that time. Discovery Academy, still there and just doing remarkable work there. But that model began to embrace some progressive elements to it. And so how do we reach kids, particularly kids that have been in a traditional school setting and that has not been effective for them? So Berrien Springs had a record of having some success with those student populations, and there's an incredible need across Michigan. And so at that time, they expanded into Battle Creek, Michigan, with a like
Yeah.
program that really was a satellite location for that Berrien Springs Alternative Education Program. And so that is West Michigan Virtual Academy. It is unique in our division. It was our first foray into the satellite world. They also provide alternative education for grades 6 through 12. So that is our
Oh,
one middle level program. And that
okay.
center is last year eclipsed 500 students. So it's our largest single center. As you get into that game and you start to learn how to meet the needs of those
Hmm.
students, it started to expand. And really, I think off of the just the momentum of the need across Michigan for non-traditional learning programs. And so it moved northward, and then from there, you success breeds success, and being able to be effective for kids where the non-traditional school options had not been able to be, really it just spread from there. And so where the need is where Berrien Springs goes. And eventually the portfolio diversifies a little bit, and it
Right.
became, and so now we still have West Michigan Virtual Academy. We also have 2 other offsite divisions. One is a partner district division, and so that's Link Learning. And Link Learning has 16 centers statewide. And what we do with that division, we go and partner with other school districts. So we become an extension of our partner districts. So we kind of come in. They have identified a need for alternative learning and an online 24/7 access environment, and we become an extension of them. So they're referring students to us, and we're communicating very closely with those districts, and we're meeting the need of those kids in that district and in that region. And then we have another division which operates 10 centers. That's Success Virtual Learning Centers of Michigan. That's a different model. That's more of an urban model. We have 10 centers statewide. They tend to be in that urban, high at risk parts of Michigan, 5 in the greater Detroit area. On the east side, Lansing, Grand Rapids, the south side of Grand Rapids, Muskegon, and then Port Huron, easternmost. And so that division really identifies parts of Michigan where, one, there are really significant dropout rates, and then two, where there just aren't a lot of access points to alternative learning, particularly a model like ours, where we can meet a student any time of the day, whatever those
Right.
needs are. So the flexibility for our students to yes, work independently, asynchronously, remotely, but also to access the adults that make up our program when they need those people as well. And I think that at the heart of our offsite programs is it's a people. It's not an online program. I'm often
No,
careful
I
to
get it.
just
Yeah.
say that,
Yeah.
but it's so many people. We have a really dynamic staffing structure, all built to respond to the needs of each student that is in those programs. And so that's the beautiful work, is just the people that we have that surround kids no matter what those circumstances and needs are.
Yeah, and when you have something that works and you make it so that others don't have to reinvent that wheel, that's amazing. That is just an amazing thing. And I had no idea how. I mean, I knew a little bit about Berrien Springs, but I had no idea all of that was happening. That's so fantastic.
Yeah.
So
It's remarkable. I tell
yeah,
people we have 5,000 kids and 5,000 stories, and
yeah,
we're built to meet those circumstances, and that's what's really wonderful about our work is each student is a unique project. We're
right.
not the school system is not the project itself. The student is
Mm-hmm.
the project. We're going to design and flex around what that student's needs are, and that I tell you, that's the real joy, is when you're able to meet those needs for such a dynamic group of students.
Well, and it's so rewarding for the teachers and the staff too to have that freedom. I'm a speech therapist. I know about kids' needs and things that there's nothing like coming in to as an SLP and coming into a session as a speech pathologist, knowing these kids really well. And I'm online. I'm talking about online because I've been doing online since 2011, and knowing something's wrong. The second that they log in, that, and everything goes out the window because it's like, nope, there's something happening with this child that has changed from the child that I saw last week. And everything gets pushed to the side and you go, hey, so you're not in the same place, or you look sad, or whatever. And having the freedom to figure out what happened. A lot of times it's, you know, mom got mad at me today, or something trivial, or it could be grandma passed away, or the dog died, or we had to move suddenly, or who knows, a million different things. But and I have a feeling that's a little bit of how it is for you guys, because if you're talking about individual stories, you have to I mean, immediately when you see something like that, as a therapist, as a teacher, you adapt.
hmm and in our programs, we take away the time element. And so I'm a
Mhm.
traditional educator. I'm a recovering language arts teacher, and football and powerlifting coach. And I did those things. And I've been a middle level principal. I've been a secondary principal for a handful of years as well. And in those spaces, that those brick walls are close and they don't flex very well. And so
Mhm.
we oftentimes, in those spaces, when a student comes into a classroom, we train teachers, and we expect teachers to identify those things. When a student comes
Right.
in and not all
Yeah.
is well, but I've got 30 other kids,
Right.
and I can't pause I can't pause life and the world for the other 30 kids to really hyper focus on the one. Well, in our world, we can. We
Yeah.
we re we eliminate a lot of the rigidity of a traditional school setting, and we allow ourselves then to hyper focus on each kid when that need arises. And so when we notice that, as you just expressed, we can stop the world, we can
Mhm.
hit the pause button, and we can focus on the kid so that at some point in time that student can access learning and be an effective learner. But we can pause all of that. That doesn't have to be the priority. Um, the student becomes the priority in that
Yeah.
circumstance.
It reminds me of the Bible story about the shepherd who goes after the one lost sheep,
Hmm.
leaves the 99. Not that he's leaving them behind, but they're in a safe space, but that one is lost, and we have
Hmm.
to whew, so good.
Yeah,
So, so
yeah,
good.
and
So
that's the
good.
work
Love
we get
that.
to do every day. Isn't that just
Yeah.
beautiful?
It is beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. So, how did you become the chief strategy officer? How did that happen?
Oh, that's a great story. I doubled down on alternative education. Goodness, 7 years ago, I was a middle school principal, and I had actually my first administrative position was in Berrien Springs, and so I became an athletic director, a high school assistant principal, then a middle school principal there, and so then I had come back to the district I first started teaching in as a middle school principal. But while in Berrien originally, I was the McKinney-Vento homeless liaison, and at that time, our off-campus programs were really starting to emerge. But I had kids in the Upper Peninsula who were homeless students, and I'm trying to work through and connect them to resources, and that never left me. I had a student who was back and forth across state lines from Wisconsin to Michigan and back again, depending on the mental status of each parent on each week. And so it was a really flex situation for a student. There's no traditional school program that could meet the life circumstances for that child. And so here I go into another traditional setting, trying to, remodel the walls of a brick and mortar building. And you just run into scenarios where you don't have the flexibility. And so I doubled down. I stepped out of that role in that district. I took over the non-traditional programs, our preschool, before school, after school, summer school, parochial partnerships for that district and our virtual ed program. And I just knew that that was the direction for me. It was toward non-traditional learning models. And then I started my PhD journey in instructional design and technology, all around that mission that we can do school differently.
Mhm.
And different doesn't necessarily mean that old is bad and
Right.
new is better. It's just that the traditional doesn't meet the needs of all. And
Right.
and so I really doubled down. I said, that's my mission, my focus, my legacy in education is that non-traditional route. And at some point in time, I had been in that game for another 4 years, just working through those non-traditional programs, building and optimizing those. And then Berrien Springs, our paths crossed again. I mean, you end up back in the program that does that most likely at the highest rate of any school district in Michigan. And so it was a really natural return to Berrien Springs for me. And for 2 years, I was the director of offsite and alternative learning. And so I was very close to the day-to-day operations, working with those three divisions, working with those teams. And so in this new role, it's a step away, but I get to focus on much larger projects. So think of it almost like now we're trying to cultivate the soil in Michigan. Yes, for
Mhm.
Berrien Springs, because we consider ourselves a leader in that regard, but for any school in Michigan that just wants to be able to operate non-traditional programs, particularly for our most marginalized students. And so this new role allows me to really shift gears away from those day-to-day a little bit and toward those big projects that can be better for all of our kids. And when I say
Right.
our kids, I say, yes, our Berrien Springs, our Link Learning, West Michigan Virtual Academy, Success Virtual Learning Centers in Michigan, all of our kids, but beyond that as well for all
Right.
districts that are really trying to do that work for kids in their communities.
Wow. That's fantastic. And so the other question that comes up is I'm thinking and just going, wow, the amazing things you're doing. How is it funded? How does
We're
that
a pub,
work?
yeah, we're a publicly funded school.
It's
And
all
so we
public funds.
We all public funds. We do oftentimes have people say, "Hey, can we donate to your school?" Like we're a publicly funded school. We got or when students come into one of our offsite centers. Now, again, depending on which part of the state they're coming from, they might be coming from a very rural setting where they've never seen a new chair or a new desk, or they might be coming from a very urban setting where they've never seen a new chair or a new desk or paint on the wall. And they come into our centers, and by design, in those spaces, they come into fresh paint. They come into,
Mhm.
equipment where all four legs of the chair are straight and touch the floor at the
Right,
same
right.
time. All of those.
Yeah, so they're
And
not
so
doing the
often,
rocking.
exactly, not doing the rock. And oftentimes it's, well, how much do I have to pay to come here? You don't have to pay to come here. Just if this is for you, we're here for you. We're publicly funded that way. So it is unique in Michigan in that our Success Virtual Learning Centers model is a cyber charter model. And so Berrien Springs operates as the educational service provider. And so in that particular model, because of where and how we operate, it may look very similar to our other models, different populations and different communities. So that model is funded still with public funds. Although in Michigan, sadly, our cyber charter programs have been targeted for budget cuts year over year. And so that's a part of the work we have to do. We have to advocate for
Mhm.
those
Yeah.
programs
Yeah,
and
yeah.
those kids and say, nope, these high at-risk kids, we know when we look at all the research, we know it takes more resources to educate a significantly at-risk kid. And so a
Mhm.
lot of our work is just purely advocating for those kids to say, it's not just a kid and a computer. It is
No.
so much more than that. And
Yeah.
and and when we really look at the kid that comes in that has need for a program like ours, they're bringing a whole lifetime of circumstances and history with them. And we've got to work through that before we can say, yeah, could you sit and focus on learning for,
Right.
for this
Yeah.
length of time? There's so much more work that
Mhm.
that student needs and deserves. And so we are publicly funded, but that still is that constant battle in Michigan to say, these are unique student circumstances and it's unique work. And by design, these programs have to look different. We
Right.
have kids that come in that have kids of their own. I sat in a graduation last year, a young lady, 23 when she walked, pregnant with her third child. And so now we have a married student expecting her living an adult life, needs that diploma to be able to get into nursing school, next to a student whose family arrived to the United States. And so we have a refugee family that had come in. Now, these two kids are sitting next to each other, completely different circumstances. Neither of those student circumstances fit well into a traditional world.
Right.
Their
Yeah.
needs are very different. We have to be able to flex and meet each student where they're at. And so a lot of times it's just the advocacy for those students, the dynamics of those students in order to meet their needs. So it's wonderful work. We are publicly funded. There's just that constant state of advocacy though for what we do.
Yeah, and you can spend money on education or you can spend money on jails. Let's spend money on education. There is a crisis in this country, a massive shortage of special education teachers. We know how devastating this can be for your students, families, and staff. Lighthouse Therapy places experienced special education teachers in virtual, hybrid, and on-site roles, and we handle everything from hiring to onboarding to mentorship. These aren't just placements, they're professionals who understand compliance, collaboration, and care. Let us help you fill in the gaps with special education teachers who really understand. We are here to help. Visit lighthouse-therapy.com/brighter together to connect with us today.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
Because it's
Yep.
so, and it's a choice that governments make. And when you choose to spend money on education, and I hope somebody who's in a state who makes those decisions is hearing me right now, because it matters. These kids matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful.
It,
It's a
and,
beautiful thing.
and
It tears me up. It's
oh, it
beautiful.
does. That's my everyday. And you
Yeah.
can't work in alternative education unless you have a heart and a passion for it. It's hard work, and
Mm-hmm.
it's
You,
taxing emotionally
yeah.
and professionally. But I get to work with people who answer that call every single day. And so when I walk into one of our centers and I see the interactions with kids, the interactions with one another, man, it just lifts you up. So you're talking about like the hair on your arms. That's
Mm-hmm.
every day in one of our centers. And watching kids come in and watching them, you said this earlier, having a safe place to do school. And some of these kids have never had a safe place to do school, or having a safe place away from a home that doesn't feel safe for a kid. We are that for kids. So
Right.
so yes, it is a school, but my goodness, it's so much more than a
Yeah, so
school.
much more than that. Yeah. And I've said this before on the show, but that was one of my biggest prayer during COVID was there were so many kids that exactly that school was their safe place, and we closed them down during COVID. And I knew that. And I was like, Lord, those kids, keep them safe. That's my biggest prayer the whole time, because I knew there were kids that were not in a safe place anymore. And it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely, look at me. I'm just a teary mess right now. You're making me cry, Mitch.
I'm
First
sorry.
one,
I'm
first
sorry. I'm
time.
not sorry.
First, no,
I'm
you're
not
not. You
sorry.
shouldn't be. It's because it's a great work. It's a great work that you're doing. So let's talk about your successes. Give us some statistics and what you guys have done, because I know you've got them. I know you've got them. So tell the world about the successes that you've had and those
Oh, man,
numbers.
I will do that. I will do that. I love to do that. And the one that jumps across for us, so as an alternative education program, one of our key metrics is graduation. The average student that comes into one of our programs is 17 and a half years old, nearly 17 and a half, with just 3 credits toward graduation. Now, Michigan, it's 18 is the baseline, is the Michigan merit curriculum says you will, this is the credits. These are the standards that you cover. So our kids are, not all of our students, but they're significantly off track. They're behind. And so when we look at all of the boxes that we know as educators, if you check this box, you're this much less likely to graduate. And if you check this box, you're this much less likely to graduate. Some of our kids are checking all of those boxes. And so last year, just in our offsite divisions, we had 1,216 students graduate. And when you think of that number, that's an unbelievable number, because we know the numbers associated with those at-risk off-track students. So our Link Learning Center, 723 graduates. Our Success Center, 421. Our at Single Center in Battle Creek, 72 kids graduated from that center. So that's just our off-campus alternative. And then on campus, we have our campus proper in Berrien Springs, that graduates over 100 students annually. And then also our alternative education program there, which graduates a number of kids. So across Michigan, Berrien Springs has helped over 1,300 students last year graduate from high school, which is just, it's an unbelievable number. And it just represents students, yes, choosing our programs when it's much easier to drop out. And the kids that end up in our program, they are at risk to drop out, or they have already dropped out and are returning to school. And so the easier pathway is not to come to one of our programs. It is the harder route. And then to do it and get across the finish line and earn that diploma is unbelievable. So we're over 1,300 kids last year that received a diploma. And you had mentioned earlier that we fund prisons at a rate. We know what the dropout to prison pipeline looks like as well. Those rates are so high. Can we get those students a diploma and change, what that next step looks like for them? Absolutely, we can. That's a lot of the work that we do. So
yeah, let's get them. And what you're doing is changing a generation, because the more that we can get them, and everybody knows in education, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist, but that diploma is really important. And I think beyond the diploma is because these kids are at risk, and they know, I mean, these children are not stupid. They know that they have been handed a losing hand, so to speak, right? They know that. But for them to be successful, to come and to have that win, to walk across the stage at graduation, woohoo, right? It's got to be such an amazing thing, for them. Yeah.
And so I get to see those every year.
Yeah.
So you got a chance to tear up earlier. Now it's my turn,
Yeah.
because when you go to those events, it is a family event. It is a community event.
Right.
And so the students know what they did to get there. Those families know what those students overcame. And sometimes because the family members didn't overcome those challenges. You had this generational poverty or these generational circumstances that they weren't able, to earn that diploma. Now here it is, and you're breaking a cycle, and that is on that stage.
Yeah.
Every graduation
Yeah.
that we have, that's what's on the stage. It's a piece of paper, but it's the story that
Right.
goes with that piece of paper that is
Hmm.
so incredible. And
Yeah.
it is a celebration. It is, and we encourage those when they. It is such a celebration for so many.
Yeah,
And
for
and
sure.
then if you go into the details, right, of that, when you look at the statistics in Michigan, it's the lifetime earnings of somebody with a high school diploma versus a lifetime earnings of somebody without. It's over $900,000 over
Yeah.
the lifetime earnings. Not to mention, the age of retirement and you have all these other factors, but it's a cycle breaker. It
Yeah.
is for sure.
Yeah, I had heard that. I'd heard it. The number I heard was 1 million. So it's like a high school diploma is worth $1 million, and like a college degree is worth 10 million or some crazy number like that. But it's just it is education matters, and you can get an education in so many different ways, and vocational schools in lots of different ways. You don't have to go to a traditional college to get an education. I didn't do it right. I graduated obviously with high school, but then I didn't know what I want. I was 17, right? I went to school for a year, lost my scholarship because I was free, right? And dropped out and then went back part-time and then I quit for a year, went back part-time for a year, quit for another year, went back again part-time and then quit for another year and then finally figured out I want this. I remember I was working in Manhattan in New York City at 56th and 6th and making $22,000 a year in 1986, I think it was. You can't live. And I was living in Westchester County, which is one of the most expensive counties in
Hmm.
the United States to live in. And I was broke. I was absolutely broke. And the guy that I was working for, he was no smarter than I am. And I looked at that and I went, nope, I need to get my education. So I finally, buckled down, figured out I was older, obviously, but went back and got my bachelor's and went straight to my master's because to be a speech therapist, you have to have your master's degree. But it was 5 years. It was 5 years of. But the funny thing was, once I went back to school, then I graduated summa cum laude because I knew I was paying for it. I wanted to be there. I knew what I wanted. But so it's a different story. But it's like you just have to fight for what you want in this world, and these kids are fighting for them, and you're helping them to fight for what they want, which is so. And it's a work that is there's no measuring it on this side of heaven for sure.
Hmm.
For
Hmm.
sure. So,
No,
all
amen to
right.
that.
Yeah. So I have one other question I try to ask most of my guests, and this is going to be a hard one for you because I'm sure when I say it, there's probably going to be 20 things that come to mind, but you can only pick one, and it can't be money, because we all want more money for our programs or for whatever, right? But so the question is, if you could and I say miraculously because I'm a Christian. You can magic wand it all you want. I don't care, but I believe God can do what God can do, and if we talk about things that God can do, He absolutely hears us. But if you could miraculously fix one thing in your world, just one thing that you never had to worry about it again, what would it be?
Goodness, one thing in the world or one thing in the school? I'm gonna stay with the
In
school
in your
world.
in your meaning in your world of your work is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Like one
yeah.
thing that you see that you wish was just not there or whatever. It goes to the heart. It's a question that goes at your heart.
Well, I followed your podcast, and so I knew this question was coming a little bit. So I'm a little bit prepped for it, FYI. If I could change one thing, it would just that every student have a representative voice. And and
Mm,
and when I think legislatively, our legislators carry the burden of an entire the burden of an entire community or an entire state. And there's no feasible way for them to be expert in all of the things that they influence. And so if I could shift one thing, it would be that there's a pathway to have voice, true representative voice, where the needs of our students are represented by the people who are working most closely with us and those students themselves, right? And so I really wish that were the case, that if we passed legislation pertaining to schools, that has gone through and had collective voice from the schools, right? And
yeah, that's
and
great.
that would be the thing, is that we really have true understanding around the impact of those decisions. And so I'm blessed because that's some of the work I get to do, right? And so I'm
Yeah.
a little bit biased toward that, and I get to wake up and work toward that goal and toward that mission. But I do feel often like that's the missing link in a lot of times, whether you're in a big business, an organization, and in any large organization, communication, voice, transparency, those are all
Mm,
things that can become barriers to being what you could possibly be.
right.
And I think legislatively, a representative voice that really truly considers the needs of each student, not the needs of students, but the needs of each student, and a true understanding of the impact of those decisions.
Mm, amen. That's a great one. That's a really great one. All right. So, Mitch, where do we've lit a fire, I'm sure, under some people that are hearing this today. And today, right now, is September 4th. So you're going to probably hear this maybe the end of October, maybe the beginning of November. We're about 6, 8 weeks out, but I know there are people that are going to be impacted by this conversation. So where do they find you? How do they find what's going on there? How do they reach out? I know Berrien Springs isn't hard to find, but how do they come to you and say, "Gosh, I know we have this," or maybe they just want to work for you? How do we go about that?
Well, maybe we'll even plug in some links into the podcast intro or something
Absolutely,
like that.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely, we can do that.
if if you want to understand our mission, I would say first and foremost go to homeoftheshamrocks.org. That's our Berrien Springs home webpage. Through that portal, you can find our offsite campus links and our on-campus non-traditional links. I would also really encourage people to get into our YouTube channels, our linklearning.org and our Success Virtual Learning Centers of Michigan and West Michigan Virtual Academy. If you want to be inspired and moved by the stories of some of our kids, get into that space. Those would be good places. If you're looking for Mitch Cumings, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's a really good way. Or just shoot me an email, mcummings@homeoftheshamrocks.org. And so if you're looking, you'll find us. And I'll share this as well. I've got to make sure I make this plug. I'll build off that last statement. There are so many remarkable people in this work, in Berrien Springs and beyond. And so when I talk about voice, that representative voice, we have some of the most determined, gritty, professionals in education, and they've got so much. So when I say that, this is not a Mitch Cumings game, and it's not even just a Berrien Springs game. It is a whole collaborative effort of people that are
Right.
just working purely from the mission of, I see that student. How do I meet the needs of that student?
Mhm.
And so one of the things we love to do as a district is collaborate with partners. And so if you're so moved by this podcast and you're like, how do I help that? Or how can they help me? Please don't hesitate to reach out. We just truly believe that we can be better through the partnerships that we have, and maybe there's something that we can offer to lift other people up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Absolutely. I love doing this. This has been one of my favorites. Mitch, it's just been such an incredible pleasure to have you on and to hear about the amazing things that are happening in Michigan and at Berrien Springs and in your life. Game changers. These are game changers, right? We are brighter together for
Amen.
sure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it greatly.